Hello, my name is Joan Petit, and I am a subject librarian at Portland State University in Oregon. I am speaking to you from traditional lands of Indigenous people, including the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, Chinook, and the Tualatin Kalapuya. At Portland State, I'm also the manager of library technologies and reference services. And today I'm going to give you an overview of some of my experiments using Perplexity AI and some of the conclusions I've drawn. And just a note on language, I'm going to be using the word source in two different ways, sometimes to refer to primary sources as used by historians, and sometimes to refer to a source used by an AI. So I'll try to differentiate between those two uses. So the context for my experiments come from just the messiness of primary sources. There's nothing really comparable to any one disciplinary specific database of scholarly articles for primary sources, because a primary source can be so many things: a memoir, newspaper article, a letter, a pamphlet, photograph, map, an interview that could be in print or audio or video, government report. And they can be in so many different places, in a licensed database organized around a theme, in a licensed database of newspapers. It could be a physical book found through the catalog, microfilm, in an online digital library, or it could be an actual item in an archive. And so you can see what some history librarians at different universities have done to try to organize groups of primary sources. At the University of Washington, Teresa Mudrock has organized ways of finding primary sources by region, by type, by time period. From the middle screenshot here is from the University of North Carolina, where they list 121 US history databases, and most of those are themed primary source collections. And at Duke, at their library, you can see that they talk about how they have over 1,000 collections that are digitized. So this is all incredible, and it also can be incredibly overwhelming to students and sometimes also to librarians. We spend a lot of time curating these long lists of possible sources and helping students find good sources. So when AI came around, or some of the recent technologies, it had me wondering, could it help us? Could it help us do this a little better? So I started with a decent prompt, which we are hearing is important. And this was inspired by and modified from a recent chat interaction we had with one of our students, undergraduate students. So the prompt I used was, let's say you are an undergraduate student taking a history class. What would be some good primary sources to use in a paper on the Opium Wars in China? And I want to be clear that I am the history librarian. I am not a historian. This is not my area of expertise, and this particular area is not something that I did any research on before I started playing with the prompt. And I went to ChatGPT and Google AI to start. So the results in ChatGPT, not surprisingly, were not great. It gave a lot of information about the kinds of primary sources that might be available, which would be helpful if that is the question you were asking. And it gave a couple specific examples of treaties that might work as primary sources, but it didn't give names or any ideas of how to find these things. I mean, it refers generally to looking at academic databases. So not surprisingly, it wasn't super helpful. Google AI, I don't have any examples of the results here, but I was similarly underwhelmed. So then I decided to give Perplexity a try. Perplexity calls itself a conversational search engine that answers queries using natural language predictive text, utilizing sources from the web. So it's basically an alternative search engine that summarizes results and links to sources. So I did the same prompt, and the first thing that I noticed, here's some screenshots of the answer that I got to the same prompt. And the first thing that I noticed is that the sources are listed right across the top. And each item that they list is a specific named primary source, and the recommendation is linked to a source, right? So they have basically cited all their sources. And so then the next thing I want to do was take a closer look at the actual sources they were using. And it was pretty interesting because a lot of these are library guides. They have library guides from Tri-College's library, Boston College, from Christopher Newport University Library, which actually I now know has a range of excellent LibGuides. They also had some results from the State Department Office of the Historian and from the UK National Archives. The only sort of weird source was a review essay from the web presence of the database Gale Primary Sources. It was evaluating the Gale collection. It was an article about sort of the Opium Wars, and it was written by a historian who specializes in that time period. So it wasn't exactly wrong, but it wasn't exactly right either. I did do a quick Google search of this, and my eyes just sort of, and a catalog search, and my eyes just sort of glazed over the results, which were a little different than this. Perplexity sorted through all that and sort of gave me a summary. So then I decided that I wanted to refine my search a little bit and see if it could actually help me identify where I could find these sources at Portland State University. So does Portland State University have any primary sources on the Opium Wars in China? I refined the search, and the results were not impressive. It basically listed almost exactly the same resources. And so it didn't really narrow in and differentiate. I mean, not surprisingly, it's not searching, it's not looking at our databases and knowing what's in those databases. It wasn't searching the catalog, right? It's searching web pages. So that didn't do much. But then I decided to ask, well, if I needed help from Portland State University, how would I get it? And I was very impressed by this answer. And honestly, it would be hard for me to write a better answer to this question as the manager of reference services at Portland State University. So it did a really good job with this. And you can see it's pulling from our website. So as long as our website is current, this information is going to be current too. And then I went even further and basically said, does it have a librarian who specializes in history? And specifically, I was asking this question because, as we know, ChatGPT is kind of a closed system without a lot of new data. Oh, by the way, I should clarify that I was using all the free versions of everything I tried. I was trying to come at this as a student or somebody who doesn't have paid access to like the better versions of these. So I wanted to see how Perplexity did at identifying basically the history librarian, and it found me. It found me. And it gave actually a really good answer as well. But in looking at these questions, I also realized that with the history questions, I wasn't really able to evaluate how good the answers were. I mean, I liked what Perplexity told me, but since I hadn't sort of done a first run through of that question, and because it's not my area of expertise, I am maybe not the best person to evaluate it. So I looked back at some questions that students had asked me, and I found one where a student had asked me for some, this was last fall, asked me for some good primary sources on Joan of Arc in English. And I had sent the student a few things last fall. And then just recently, I went in and asked Perplexity to answer that same question. And I'm going to say, I think it actually did a better job than I did. It just is able to do a big comprehensive search so quickly. So I don't know how long I spent answering that student's question. I mean, I was curious about it because it was about Joan of Arc and my name is Joan. And so I remembered it and I went in and I dove in and did a little bit of reading, and I maybe know more about Joan of Arc than I do about other saints and historic figures. But I didn't know, for example, that there was a transcript from the trial. I had helped the student with that, but Perplexity gave more, and certainly more quickly than I gave to the student. I also sort of did a historiographical question. Who were some of the main historians studying monks in medieval France? It gave me some answers. Again, I didn't try to evaluate these answers. And then I went in and asked it another question where I kind of felt like I knew the answers a little bit. In another graduate program, I studied the author Edith Wharton. So I asked Perplexity, what are the most important works by Edith Wharton? And with one error, Perplexity actually gave me a really good answer. It did a really good job giving me a list of Wharton's most important works. The only thing that it did do, you can see number 5 in the screenshot, the decoration of houses. That is actually a nonfiction book. It is not a novella or a short story as is listed here. So that was an error. But it is an important work. It just didn't categorize it correctly. So, it did pretty well at this. I did a handful more searches. I also did some searches for, I did, like a trip planning itinerary. I asked it to try to tell me how to connect to places by public transit. And I thought I knew the answer to that question, and it actually told me about a connection that was better, and the one that I didn't know about that I was able to verify was actually true. So it gave me some information I didn't already have. So here's some things Perplexity is pretty good at. Doing a big current web search quickly, synthesizing the results and presenting them in a readable way, citing and linking to its sources, emphasizing its use to sources, using pretty good sources, at least for more common academic topics. As a librarian, I cannot disagree or have any problem with Perplexity drawing on library guides from other libraries. And again, it can be pretty good at finding some obscure bits of information. The other thing it is very good at is using a positive affect. And I think this is something we all have become aware of, that the conversational tone and the sort of seeming friendliness and helpfulness of these AIs is really great. It's, I think, a good model of how to interact. But I think it's also just, it's programmed to be consistently friendly and positive, right? And I think that is something that in this time when lots of folks are feeling frazzled, that is worth something. That is worth something. So Perplexity is less good at something you can easily and quickly Google yourself. Connecting resources it finds online to what's available to you in proprietary databases through your institution, right? That is not where it excels. It's pretty good, or it's less good at something where an expert already has in-depth knowledge already. It's not very good at knowing what it's not good at. It's not good at reading your mind, right? Some AIs will ask you clarifying questions. I didn't get any of those. I don't know if it ever does that, but it didn't conduct for me anything like in reference interview. It's also maybe not good at convincing skeptics. I shared my results on Perplexity with a couple historians who work in libraries, one at my library and one who is a librarian elsewhere. And they were a little underwhelmed. One of them said, I don't think this is any better than a librarian could do. And they both went in, I think, and were asking questions where they did have a good deal of expertise. So if they got that question from a student, they probably could answer it, more quickly than maybe firing up an AI and asking it. So I have been thinking about possible uses for Perplexity. And I think it is probably, a good place to go to get you started when you don't know where to go. And this is maybe similar to how some of us might use Google Scholar when we're on a topic that's sort of interdisciplinary, or we're not sure which is the right disciplinary approach to take. So we sort of do a wide-ranging search to help us figure out where to go. I think Perplexity as a search engine is pretty useful for that. It could also be useful for a librarian prepping for a research consultation, especially in history. It could help a librarian pulling together a research guide in a new area, if only to help find other library guides, right? So that could be a really good use of this. An alternative to Google search. It could be a good tool for students in lower level history classes. That's something I'm thinking about. And possibly to help a librarian at a reference desk. I have not tried that yet, but I've thought about it. Or a librarian working on a chat reference question. I have many questions, lingering questions. How does it do searching for traditional academic content? I have not started playing with that at all. Is this a tool better for us to use as librarians or to teach students to use? Is it better than a librarian? Is it more approachable? Is it friendlier, less intimidating? What happens when students use it? Can they learn to write decent prompts? Is it a good use of our time to teach them prompt writing? Like, would it be good to use class or our limited classroom time with them, not to show them the path, but to teach them how to ask somebody else or an AI for the path? And then one of the big questions is, what happens when you talk to professors about this? And what will the history professors in particular think about this? Many of my colleagues in the history department use a lot of technology in their classrooms, but may have some suspicion about using anything connected to AI. And I almost think it might be like better to talk about it as a search engine rather than as an AI. So all of that is to say, I think this is incredibly useful as a tool for finding historical primary sources. I'm going to start using it more and more instead of just going into Google. And if there are any history or humanities librarians who are interested in working on a bigger project to evaluate Perplexity specifically in these ways, please do reach out to me at Portland State University. Again, I'm Joan Petit, jpettit at pdx.edu.